Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú
The Ashen Forge. The Ashen Forge.
Hello and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How's it going?
Great.
So,
going?
Yeah.
We're back.
Yeah, I missed last Sunday. I was a little sick. Kids got sick, which is great because it was spring break. You know, great way to start spring break. But
oh yeah, it's the best time to do it.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't have to miss any classes.
But no, yeah, we're back. And actually in a week, we'll have this coming week, another live stream. So some stuff to talk about. I think before we get into some of the questions that people have started posting, which we usually will go over, there's also a lore discussion. One of the dev discussions was on lore, which I'll read here in a minute. But anything, we have missed 2 weeks. Anything new?
Yeah. Sadly, a voice known in many games and a face known in many things, Lance Reddick has passed at the age of 60. Still hurts because he's still an active character in Destiny 2. We don't know what the fate of the character is. And I don't want to say anything about the content that's happened recently, but that and other stuff that's happened in the game just really hit hard.
Yeah, I haven't been playing that, so I was not expecting that to come up for this podcast. But yeah, and you know, from my perspective, kind of young.
Yeah,
well, I say I'm old, but he's like 2 years older than I am, or a year older than I am. So
yeah, but not only at 60, but man, the guy was always in shape. So that's just a shock and a surprise to everyone, and all the stuff that he's been in, just always amazing, always an absolute talent. Not only his acting skills, but of course that signature voice of his will be missed. My condolences to his family, his friends, and all the fans.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I was in the forums yesterday. Someone was talking about concern over them updating to Unreal Engine 5.2, and if they keep doing this, it'll cause delays. And one of my things was, again, I just was not expecting. So, in 2021, I think in May, not May, maybe August of 2021, right after Alpha 1, as people were talking about how the dwarves look like gnomes and they want them to be beefier. And I was saying, don't expect them to be much wider, because if they make them much wider, that means they're going to have to change a whole bunch of stuff. And they're going to have to tweak a whole bunch of stuff. And if they do that, if they do make them much wider, then expect delays, right? It's going to cause some kind of effect, and it's going to mean that they're more likely to make changes to other races. And when I said that, and people were, of course, arguing with me, you don't know what you're talking about. I was like, not expecting in any way, shape, or form that delays could be a 2-hour gap between Alpha 1 and Alpha 2, which is kind of where we're at now. And that led me to think that the fascinating thing about there being a 2-year delay, or a 2-year gap between Alpha 1 and Alpha 2, this kind of came up in my mind because I was thinking about having Ombwa on and when we could expect to have Ombwa on as a guest, which I think is no time soon. And that means that Steven hasn't been doing as many interviews in the last 2 years as normal. Also, I think this is the longest amount of time that we haven't actually had some form of hands-on, or I haven't had some form of hands-on with the game, because I went to PAX East and I got to play a demo. I went to PAX West and I got to play a demo, and then we had APOC. I think we had something in between APOC. We had a little test before then. And then Alpha 1, I think 2 years is the longest we've gone without any kind of hands-on with the game, which was just interesting. It's not a super concern or, hey, the sky is falling. I just was like, oh, this 2-year gap is kind of having some interesting ramifications in terms of how we've been able to interact with people like Steven and just hands-on with the game itself.
Yeah, I saw that. That's also was one of the questions in the forum post for the upcoming live stream is, what is there any concern about the constant updatings? I think somebody was asking if they were going to go at a 5.3, I think is the next one. Mm-hmm. And I put that in chat. It seems like when they went 1.1 to 0.2, I feel like they said, well, it'll take a month, we'll have things out in January. It's like, well, we haven't really heard anything else since. Like, how long does that actually take? Is that something you spend more time on in a test branch sort of setting? And right now you focus on, hey, this is good. Yes, it could be better, but this is good. Let's get it out. And we can update, later on once we're actually up and running and successful. So I'm also curious how Unreal does that. So when they push out 5.3, like how many machines have they tested on, right? So how many different variations of video cards, memory, Intel, AMD, like how easy is it going to be to break things in that setting? I don't know. And I don't know the answer to that, but
I think one question that I would want to ask if I was like at an Unreal booth right now, talking to a rep or something. I'm saying that not because I went to any conventions in the past week, but they did just have, was it PAX and GDC right on top of each other? So I love it when they do that. My favorite was the Triple Crown doing, was it GDC, PAX, and what the hell was the other one? Just like one after the other after the other. It was nuts. At least I only had to do 2 of them. The project manager had to do the other one before me. Dude was run ragged by the end, poor guy. But the question I would ask them was, what is the idea of Unreal 5.0? Do you consider this, here's the full cake with the icing and everything on it, and then we'll bake you a new cake that you can, use for your new display and your new everything, and you can choose either cake, depending on what your project needs? Or is it more like, here is Unreal 5. This is a perfectly baked cake, no icing, no toppings, and we're going to provide them. If you want the icing, we'll give you the icing. If you want the little those decorative little dabs that go all around on top of the icing, yeah, we can give you that. If you want the whole thing to be on like one of those hanging string bridge sort of thing, so it looks like it's just suspended in midair with a couple of strings, we can build it on one of those for you if you want. We're going to keep putting these things out, and when you find the version of the cake that you really want to use, build to it. You can keep building on the way iteratively to make it easier to get to the next cake, but it's up to you to decide the cake that you want, and then from that cake, you build the rest of the tools that you want and need. And along the way, you've probably already been building those tools. You've probably already got your own custom sprinkles. You've probably already got your own candles that you like. we'll provide some and they'll be good, but if you've already built the ones you want and our new tools don't actually bring you the candles that you're looking for, you can skip that update. Don't worry about it. You'll get the candles if you decide to update, 2 versions later down the road if you want to get the heat proof fondant or whatever for the sparklers, but that's down the road. And that's what I wonder with it. Is it when you start on Unreal 5, is the expectation that you've got the complete set of tools and everything else you're going to do with it is your own custom work? Or is it more, and I think this is more what they intend to do, is a working back and forth. We make some stuff, you make some stuff, you test it, we check it, we work together, we add more of the features and upgrade, you build more of the stuff, and it's more of like an interface between developers and Unreal itself, that they're partially building the tools towards the things that the people need, also knowing that there are other things that they had planned to build with it. And then it's up to the developers to choose whether they want to use their custom tools or the ones that come from the engine or some combination of them. So
it's always up to the individual devs to decide what they're going to use. And there's always going to be these little iterations. So they're going to release their 5.0, and you should expect months down the road, they're going to keep working on stuff and they're going to add something else that's not literally game changing because it's a 5.x. It's a point X. It's not enough for it to be a 6.0. It's just a little addition. Hey, maybe you'll like this, or hey, we improve this, or hey, and then each dev studio is going to decide. I mean, they're going to make their own stuff, and they're going to take some stuff from whatever else comes out, and it's really up to each team to decide how much. Because that's the thing, like their character creator, they're not using exactly what came with Unreal 5, although a lot of those tools really bump up and give them opportunities to do some things. But then IS has to tweak some stuff because, the Unreal Engine dev team doesn't have Pyre and Vec and Nakua and all that stuff, and you have to figure out how you're going to tweak all that stuff for your own thing. But
MetaHuman,
but that's
I believe,
MetaHuman, MetaHuman creator, but they're always going to be tweaking and adding new stuff, and there's always going to be a reason to that it might be worthwhile to add the latest cool thing on that's going to allow you to tweak your environment better. It'll help you do seasons and regions better. I mean, right? Because how cool it is that we can have these animals changing along with the seasons and all that stuff. I mean, that's super cool. But I mean, kind of at some point, you got to lock that. I mean, that's the reason why you have outside people giving you money for your game so that they can say, hey, you guys have to ship. Because if we don't make you ship, you'll just keep saying, hey, I could do this, and hey, I could make it better this way, and hey, I could do this, and this. Oh, this is so cool. Actually, that's how I decided to get into video games, kind of. It was right around when Vampire the Masquerade came out, and I was like, oh, hey, I could write like some short stories. They don't have any books or anthologies for Vampire the Masquerade, and maybe I could write some short stories. Or, oh, there's these graphic things. Maybe I could get something like Photoshop and make it like a graphic novel. And oh, hey, there's video games. I bet I could, get some tools and add some audio. And hey, I think I want to get into video games because, I think there's tools there you can do this these days. You could always keep adding and make it better. And then at some point, somebody has to be the bad guy and say, ship it. Right? I would stay in college forever if I didn't have to go out and get a job and actually make some money to support myself. But if I could stay in college and keep going to classes forever, I would do that. I know people who are like, no, you got to get your PhD now because we've been paying grants for you to do it. get out and do something with the stuff we've given you, so.
I would say, though, the things that they can really highlight to make the updates seem worthwhile to us is showing exactly what the features are of those updates that they're utilizing. Like the idea that they were able to get a new version that allows them to have multiple artists working on the environment and use a system that's able to integrate layers together when people are working on them in separate spaces. That's huge. That's gigantic. Of course you're going to take that one. That's game changing in a giant way when you're working on a world like that you're able to just work on the section you want and know it's going to merge up with everybody else's stuff because you've only got this little section that you're working on. You're not taking over the entire thing. It isn't one artist who you're waiting on them to commit their terrain changes to the entire thing before you can download it and make changes again. That's gigantic. So, for something like that, that makes sense. And I can see where, people who maybe haven't worked in games might not quite understand how important that is. But, basically imagine you're working with 100 people to do just something simple, just a color by number sort of thing. But everybody has to stop working when one person goes up to paint their one color in one of the spots they've found, and then they've got to back off and wait for someone else. It's going to take forever. You could have just had one person do it a lot quicker, but if it's a world-sized sort of thing, that's not reasonable. You need those 100 people working on their different little sections. And so that's what we're talking about with that sort of tool and what that brings. So upgrading to, I believe it was 5.1 that brought that. That's gigantic. I wouldn't say no to that. I'd say absolutely yes. Like, do it now. Do it yesterday. Like, that's big time. And I'm glad they made that change. So that's, I think, the thing. Communicate to us what the update's going to bring, what the features it's going to provide are. And it makes it a lot easier for us to kind of swallow that and understand that these are important changes. And yes, it might push things out a little bit. Maybe it might also save way more time that we don't know. And even though it's a little bit on the back end getting it in, on the front end, it's going to be, leaps and bounds more performance or efficiency or reducing of development time, whatever it might be.
Saving time is a ridiculous concept for a game that was supposed to ship before 2020. I mean, what does that mean? It's meaningless.
It is a fine line. It is a tightrope. I agree, Neuro. That's something that just long term makes sense, right? You just have to do it. How you explain that, though, and honestly, whether or not explaining it even matters anymore, I don't know. Because when you look multiple places, there's ways to sort of judge it. Well, you can go to Google Trends. I just was doing that earlier today to look. And I mean, there's a clearly steadily declining interest in Ashes of Creation. Now, maybe that's what they want right now. I don't know. But when you go to Google Trends, it's a clear, downward angled line. The posting questions for the live stream also. Sorry.
Oops.
Also, it will probably go off here again. Usually by the time I'm able to post, there's like 3-4 pages of questions already. But like I got in on one and there was, I think, not even 2 yet. So there's even, there's a clear lack of interest. Even a show like ours, which isn't huge, but, people will watch, some do. And on YouTube, clearly rises and falls based off of interest of Ashes of Creation. And right now, kind of the interest in what we do has been the lowest it's been in years. And so, I don't know, maybe by design, but you look back through Kickstarter, and to your point, Diggs, we've had 2 years between Alpha 1 and 2. There still is going to be, per Kickstarter, there's still a closed beta 1, a closed beta 2, and assuming after a closed beta would be an open beta. It's like, how much time, there's still, at this point, I would guess, 4 stages of testing pre-release that have to occur. I don't know. But I do know people are clearly getting, I think, a little bit frustrated. But this goes back to my thing that I've always said all along. I honestly don't care. I think doing monthly updates might be too much. The less you know, sometimes the more mystique there is to it, the better. But right now their hole has been dug. So
we had kind of said that of Chronicles of Valyria at some point, that instead of the constant updates, if it was like, disappear for a little bit.
Pantheon.
Show us. Oh, is it Pantheon? Yeah.
Yes.
Disappear for a bit. Show us, some big changes when some big changes come through, and make a big thing of it, and then go hide a bit until you got more. I haven't really checked back on Pantheon, but I'm still interested to see how building the world with Houdini turns out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm fine with their monthly updates, but I think you don't want to push back too far because, that was the other kind of promises that Ashes was going to be transparent. And of course, that was when Steven was completely green at being a game dev. And, it's always fascinating to watch gamers transition from being a gamer to working in production. And that's when you're like, yeah, devs never know how to do this, but now that I'm on, I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to fix everything. And then you get on, you're like, oh, yeah, I see why they aren't doing that. Oh, yeah. Well, I wish I could do that, but it's just not feasible to do this.
Or you come in and say, man, I really want to do this. Can we do this? And they all look at you. Yes, we all want to do this. We've all wanted to do it for 2 years. By golly, we don't have the time and resources to do it. It happens. It does. Games are expensive to make.
And they take time, especially MMORPGs. So getting it done in 3 years was kind of unrealistic to begin with. But, when it's your first game, you don't know that.
Before we get
especially when you especially when you see all the stuff that Unreal Engine gives you at that time. That's why he was so excited, because of all the stuff that was coming out of the package at the time that you could do. And that's why he was thinking, right, we can get this done really quickly, which is also why when he tells you, updating the 5.1 is going to make things go so quickly. So, I mean, yeah, but if you keep upgrading to the next one, each one is going to take some time, and that's kind of the way it works.
Before we get to the lore character discussion, I wanted to mention I have been playing Neverwinter Online. I just started this last week because I was just really curious. Actually, I started with Star Trek Online, which was okay, but and the gameplay or the visuals of Neverwinter reminds me a lot of Lord of the Rings Online. But Diggs, I know you played some. I don't know how long it's been, but they've switched their. It's interesting. The reason I'm bringing this up is because of some. I always talk about why do characters have levels. They only have character levels up to 20, and there is no experience. That all changed apparently in like 2020. And max character levels 20. You do not get experience points. You complete quests. You go through lore. You do storylines, and that's how you advance in character level. And then really you're more of a power level than a character level. And that's a variety of stuff I'm still learning, not just gear, but companions, mounts, the boons, a ton of stuff. But I just thought it was interesting when we talk about why are there character levels? Because I think from what I read prior to this change, that it was like level 80 was what you would get to in Neverwinter, but now it caps at 20. Because it took me a minute. I started playing for a couple of days, and I'm like, well, why am I not advancing in level? And then I finally Googled it. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is almost what I had envisioned in many ways. But anyways.
I will have to play it again and see what that is like. And it's weird that you say 2020, and I'm thinking that was like 2 years ago, and now it's 3 years ago. But Yeah, I can't remember the last time I jumped into it. So that was the last game that playing Neverwinter Online was a lot of fun. I played the alphas and betas, and played launch, went to max, and then burnt out. That was 2013, and I was figuring I think I'm done with MMORPGs because you get on this treadmill, you hit max level, and then you're stuck waiting 2 years for the next thing. And I don't want to be stuck waiting for 2 years, waiting for the next thing. And that's what I liked. Then, like about a week or two later, is when I ran across the announcement for EverQuest Next, and I think this kind of node type system is kind of the answer to that, so that you're always have something to do. You're always trying to, protect your node and build up the node and all that stuff. I think that's kind of the way to go, so that you always have something to do. But so that was 2013. I did jump back in maybe in 2018, 2019, but I'm pretty sure I haven't done it since 2020. So I'll be interested to see what this new kind of leveling is like.
Well, any pre-existing characters apparently will just automatically start at 20, because mine was created back in 2013, and that's why it was 20 when I logged back in. But yeah, it's an interesting way of doing things, because you still have other content, group content, raids, so you still have this sort of normal MMO perspective, but in the absence of experience points and character leveling. So
I mean, the fascinating point about that is it's based on D&D, which is where all experience points come from. Right?
That's the thing I was actually going to ask about. Does Neverwinter have the thing that like old school and old school adjacent dungeon masters would use with the enemies, that if they hit you, you de-level, that they sap a level from you? And if they hit you enough times, you revert to level 1, and they hit you again, you become like one of their undead minions, and your character's just gone. No. Nothing like that.
No.
Okay. No. Well, that's I think the thing that I'm not going to say is missing, but I think that's kind of a little interesting. The idea that the end game doesn't have that risk factor that, like, even low level D&D, like first edition, second edition and stuff, you would be seeing things early on that would just outright like super kill you. You're not just dead, you're now the undead minion of that thing. Great job. You should have not tried to steal something from that lich in his study. You probably should have steered clear of that.
But like when
you didn't know, you were just a new player. I mean, you look like a skeleton of the book.
Obviously, since it's D&D, it is very much based on that. So when you die, you don't have like a sickness or whatever. Resurrect. It's you have an injury, so you can get various kinds of injuries that then cause your character some sort of debuff, basically, until you're able to heal your injury. So.
I see. And one thing I did want to say, yeah, the EQ Next, or really anything trying to do a little bit more than the theme park, is something that I've been wanting for a while. That I think of, you go in Orgrimmar, okay, you come back a year later, nothing's changed, literally nothing. There hasn't even been any attempt. You guys haven't tried to breach the gates of the Alliance capital. They haven't tried to breach the gates of your capital. I would go in and run amok in the starter town in the forest area, the one that wasn't the Barrens, but the other like low starting area. Literally just go in there as a level 60 back in like first run vanilla and just kill everybody and everything, all the players, all the NPCs, till they'd bring 3 level 60s to finally root my super geared PvP ass out of there. And so, like, that's the closest I could do to bringing them emerging content that broke from the norm. And it wasn't something that was pleasant. It was unpleasant. I'm trying to level up in this area where the elves level up. And here's this dude who's literally killing the entire town. He isn't even breaking a sweat doing it. Like, this sucks. Can somebody do something? Can we rally people to do? But you couldn't, because the forced level differential. I'm level 60, you're level 30. By default, you just can't do anything. You're throwing marshmallows at me. I'm laying down bricks and you're throwing down marshmallows. So no, you can't actually rally and do something about it. You need to bring your friends. Nothing like, or you kill Lord British somehow, whether it's through an exploit or otherwise, you kill Lord British. He's back in an hour. You didn't really change the game, did you? You just killed an NPC. And that sucks, because just having an arbitrary NPC that's the king that you're not supposed to kill, but somehow you can kill, and then he just comes back, that's boring. Great. That's not, you have robbed the players of a chance at emergent gameplay by doing that.
Or just something different.
And I suppose that was also trying to lead into the question of the week here.
Oh, yeah, the lore. So, yeah, we can move that. So, yeah, this was dev discussion number 49, and it is on lore characters. And the question, I'll read it here. So, what do you want to see out of important characters in the lore? How do you like interacting with them, and where do you want to see yourself in the story? Important characters.
I go back to what I wanted to see, because I was given that idea from watching Revival and Chronicles of... You can put the notebook down. You already know what we have to say on this, I think. But that was at Umbo there. But yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that I was hoping to see, is that NPCs actually exist as characters in a living, breathing world, that there isn't just a default static NPC. Everyone comes from somewhere. They have a history. They have a family. They were born of parents. They might have children of their own. They have siblings. They have relatives. They have wants and needs and interests that have somewhat been part of their, background, just in how the character was rolled up, but then also in their interactions with players. If an orc comes by and kicks them in the balls like once or twice a day, they're going to have an aversion to orcs. That should happen. It shouldn't just be, oh, orc kicked me in the balls again. Oh, well, I'm going to get back to farming. No, I would hope that, the interactions with players would be the next step. You've got a character who exists in the world. Now let the players engage with them and change their, life experience and expectations and outcomes and the sort of things they're trying to do. That's really what I would hope to see. And then where we exist in that is that the NPCs are the salt of the earth. They are the bread and butter. They are the people that keep the world moving. You want to make sure there's enough firewood, there's NPCs that are working on that. You want to make sure that all the houses in the town and the town hall and everything's repaired. You don't have to wait on a player. We've got NPCs for that. NPCs to help with a lot of the things, filling in the gaps to make a living, breathing world, but actually having them as people who are worth engaging with, and that have changes based on the engagement. That I can go up to someone who is clearly struggling and be like, yo, dog, I got like 100 gold that's just weighing me down. Don't ask. Here it is. May you improve your farm and, get some clothes that are better than the shabby rags you and your family have been struggling in. Please, this is my gift to you. Like that's the sort of stuff that I'm looking for. And so then what are we in that world? We're the agents of change. We're not the ones who are gathering sticks for firewood. No, we're the ones going out and kicking ass. We're the ones who are driving the action. We're the ones who are making the big changes occur in the world and are trying to resist those changes coming from outside forces like the corruption and your giant raid bosses. So maybe not heroes, because you're not, you don't have to do things that are heroic, but the agents of change, the characters that the players play, are the ones that push the struggles and push the conflicts, whereas the other characters, they exist within, they try to do what they can to survive and get by. Maybe some of them improve, maybe some of them get into worse situations. Farmer's got a drug addiction. You gave him 100 gold and he just drinks it all up in skooma or whatever, and then he's got an addiction to that and he's 100 gold poorer. So that's the sort of stuff I'd like to see, is that the players are the agents that change and push the conflicts and the narratives, but the NPCs exist as the useful, helpful, living, breathing world people that, you know, make it feel like you're actually engaging with people in a town, in a kingdom.
Are you the hero of the story, Diggs?
I'll just read the beginning of my answer in that thread, which was, my hope is that there's not a focus on blonde-haired, blue-eyed Alar as the primary lore heroes, as was the case for EQ and WoW. They're always blonde-haired, blue-eyed humans or elves.
Or a
who are
Karen
the,
who's got the blonde hair and the blue armor, so you still end up with
yeah, and they're the heroes, and then the non-humans are the ones, the colored the colored non-humans are the evil side somehow, even though, you know, originally with WoW it was supposed to be depending on your perspective, but no, they finally got to the real reveal that the non-humans were tricked. The Horde was tricked into being evil. But yeah, I'm hoping that there's a focus that we would get to see um, leaders of the, you know, Nakua who were prominent or whatever. Um, in the narrative, in the dev curated narrative. But especially since we have religions as a key aspect of the game, I'm hoping bishops and popes have opportunities to interact with their patron gods. We have real gods wandering around or influencing the world. I hope we see that. Um, I hope we get to interact with the ancients. The ancients are supposed to be in the castles, and we have to kick them out. So that should be fascinating. But you know, with EverQuest Next, one of the things I loved about the concept of story bricks was that you could be interacting with the shopkeeper, and if you say buy from the shopkeeper's wife too often, then the shopkeeper becomes jealous and either raises the prices with you or maybe tries to start a combat with you. That your interactions actually do influence how the NPCs behave. I think that's too much to expect from the AI for Ashes of Creation. I think that's too ambitious. We should not expect that level of interaction from the AI. But it would be cool, and I think this could be possible, if the NPCs were responding to what I forget the name that Stephen uses for them. It's not resources. What services are built or haven't been built? Maybe there are certain NPCs who are gonna try and nudge you into building specific services. Maybe there's NPCs who are gonna nudge you into trying to build specific temples. More importantly, based on events or monster coin attacks, if these services get destroyed, it would be nice to have the NPCs have reactions. Maybe their wares become more scarce. Maybe they become more despondent in their dialogue as they don't have access to these services. Um, you know, maybe their shops get destroyed during a monster coin event, and that, you know, has an effect on them where they're trying to rebuild. Or maybe the goblins in the goblin event come in and do some damage, you know. And it would actually be cool again. Maybe some of the NPCs would be on the goblin side, just in terms of, you know, dialogue and wanting to support them. And hey, maybe we could do this in a peaceful way, even if we can't actually do it in a peaceful way. Um, so we have these event hooks in the game. It would be nice if the NPCs could, at least even through dialogue, respond to those. So it's not always the same.
For me, for the sort of major characters, Sorry. Somebody keeps going.
That was the
inside
second one.
Yeah.
Yep, you called it.
The sort of major character points. One thing that sort of would drive me nuts with World of Warcraft going into Stormwind and seeing Anduin, right? I can just walk on up to him and there he is sitting in his throne, doesn't move, can wave, can talk to him, can say hi. You know, some of the more important characters I would much rather not be able to see regularly and have them be big plot points of lore. Only really be visible if a node is being threatened, if a big raid has to be called, so that it's not a constant interaction, and have there be more sort of middlemen or women that you're interacting with more that maybe also have a name to them, but you don't really see these top people until you've done enough to earn their respect, or you can provide something to them to actually make them notice you to a point where they actually just won't let you come into wherever they're at. Now I know we don't have factions per se, but I'm not necessarily talking about a faction system in the normal sense, but just as far as deeds and things that you've done or contributed to the node, to whatever system that you're living in. The other thing I would love to see with characters, you know, I think we can naturally dislike and like NPCs. I think we can all think of NPCs that we've liked, and all of us can think of ones that we've disliked. I would actually like to have the ability in game to reflect that. If I dislike this NPC, I would like to do something in the game that makes the NPC aware that I do not like them. Now, whether that might be, what was it? What was it we played? Not Kingdoms. What's the game you had me play of the studio, the picture that went down, that digs? Oh gosh, what was it? Kingdoms.
Yeah, Reckoning. Kingdoms of
Yes.
Amalur. Reckoning. Yeah.
One thing I loved about that is if I didn't like an NPC, I could accept their quest, and when I come back, just kill them or take, you know, oh, you wanted me to find this trinket. Well, I'm going to keep it. Sorry. Like I have that ability because I don't like that character. And then that has some sort of impact on things further. You know, maybe I start a feud with some blacksmith because they rip me off, and I let them know that I think they're terrible at what they do. And then the node levels up, and maybe they end up with a more prominent role. And now, because of how I treated them, they won't, you know, they have something extra special that I don't have access to because, you know, we feuded a little bit, and now I have to do something to gain back, you know, that ability to purchase. Or maybe I can purchase this item, but it's going to cost me more than it would cost you because, you know, I had some sort of dialogue tree where I told them they were an idiot and I hated them. Yeah. So just more interactions.
Yeah. Reputations with the NPCs. I mean, that's kind of interesting because we have that on a faction level, right? In previous games where you could raise your reputations with one goblin faction versus another goblin faction, or, you know, one gnome faction versus another gnome faction, or centaur faction. But to kind of do that with individual NPCs where you have to, and maybe some are pissed off that you were helping or you're frequenting one shop when they want you to frequent theirs. You know, you're disloyal because, you know, you're supposed to only buy stuff at my shop, but I saw you went over there last night. What were you doing there last night? Who were you talking to? Again, that it would be fascinating if we could do that, and I think that's not as complex as Storybricks would be. But,
Or,
you know,
if I'm mayor, do I have the ability to kick out NPCs? Just like, I don't want you here anymore. Time to go.
That would be funny.
I mean, that becomes another thing that the people under you get to judge you as a mayor. Like if you kicked out the blacksmith just because you didn't like the character, and now they can't repair their sword, like, are they going to vote you out as mayor?
Well, what if the blacksmith has a lawyer? Is there a legal system in a court that's required to actually kick someone out?
Not if not one's established.
A blacksmith with a lawyer. Yeah, you wanted to kick me out. Well, all right. Well, let's talk about that because I'm going to take some stuff with me here. You see. Yeah, that's definitely something else that I think about. You're going to try to use the law against people. There might be some systems in the laws for them to, you know, get a little protection from such a sudden change. Or it could just be that you go full draconian. It's like, all right, you, and you. You're all practicing witchcraft, so we're going to take all of your land. We're going to execute you in this really terrible way to prove that you aren't a witch. And screw your families. We're just taking your land. We're taking everything. Sorry, you're a witch. The state wants your stuff. You don't have any remittance. You don't have any say. There is no redemption for you. It's, and it'd be draconian. Everyone would notice. And I don't know if everyone would flee or if they'd be up in arms or what. I would like to see, the townsfolk actively revolt, that even though players are the ones that drive change, you screw with them enough and they will rise up. That I would like to see.
We also have the ability, supposedly, to create minions to guard our caravans and to guard our freeholds. And I'm hoping that we can progress those and we can watch them, develop over time. And then it would also be fascinating to see how famous or infamous the minions of other players become. How they start affecting the story, or how we react to seeing them, when we go on caravan runs or during sieges, whatever. Well, we could see how they impact uh, our expectations, but we'll have to get to Alpha 2 first.
Yeah.
Which is a fairly good transition, because that's a frequent question anymore on live streams is when's Alpha 2? I don't want to know anything other than when is Alpha 2. Just want to know Alpha 2. So,
yeah.
But yeah, we do have a show coming up. They have a show, I should say, coming up Friday. So there's a bunch of questions being popped up. And I'm just kind of going to go through. Well, I'm going to start with this one, because this was one I would love to see answered. And I think, Neuro, you would love to see answered, was what is the closest that two freeholds will be able to be placed near each other?
Yep. This goes back to what I was saying a couple of weeks ago. Show me a top-down map, just a concept of what the spaces and places would kind of look like across a region, so we have some idea of like where things are placed and how they're all set up and all that sort of thing. Yes, Ultima Online. We already talked about Ultima Online. I said about killing Lord British earlier. I didn't just enter chat. But yeah, it is definitely something that I'm very curious to see, because there's a lot of ways, based on what they've talked about, there's a lot of ways that it could play out. And without really having just like a simplified model to kind of communicate that to us, I'm still at the point where it's like, I don't really know about this whole freehold system and how it's all going to work, and exploitability and what sort of issues. Like, I wonder, train enemy to freehold, is that going to be a thing, for example? Or is there going to be like an enemy border cutoff that if you get on a freehold, it's like, no, we can't go there. That's human territory or something, and they run off.
So my question would be, Neuro, can we get a demo of that before we get nodes 3? Because I kind of want to know how close do nodes get to each other, like especially metros. Like, how close can two metros be?
I don't think two metros can be close enough to each other, because it's going to be.
I don't know what enough means. I'm just saying we can only have 5. I don't know how close they can be. I have some idea of how far away they could possibly be, but how close? And I'm not saying like touching each other. There is some degree of closeness. I would love to see a demo of how close they could possibly get. And then that would help us also see something about freeholds. But I mean, when are we going to get nodes 3? Maybe we'll get Freeholds 1 before we get Nodes 3.
It's an honestly interesting sort of question, because if the centers of influence start in 5 different regions, but the players slowly push them as close together as possible, there will eventually be a limit where it's like, no, you can't have tier 6s next to each other. You got to have like a 5 and maybe a 4 in between. But then that's relative to the sort of region and the seat of power that's covering. And so I do wonder, if you really, really try to mess with things and push things, if an area here that's, while this is the region of influence, you're able to push the capital all the way to here. And in this one, you're able to push the capital, the metropolis, all the way to here. Just how close? So they're going to be separated by 2 tier 5s? Is there going to be 2 tier 5s and a tier 4? Or is it going to be very much where the metropolis is at? Everything goes like 5, 4, 3 and just drops off after that. And it just kind of becomes, that area is now kind of free to claim. And that's where the power can also kind of change to make sure it never actually becomes, the nucleus of 2 blobs being up on each other.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I thought you might enjoy that one. I still think that they're going to actually be fairly close together. I still say, when we had our discussion 2 weeks ago and it turned into we pulled it from the forums, and there was a long forum discussion about PvP on freeholds that apparently now is allowed. You can, PvP can occur anywhere on a freehold outside of the house structure. And I will say, my question that I wrote here was, does crafting experience lessen corruption, as a experience gain? Is it just combat experience, or is it any kind of experience that contributes to the node? But I still think the only reason they would do that, the only thing that makes sense, is that they're expecting freeholds to potentially be close enough where if you had no PvP on freeholds, it would just feel very, very choppy. And the way to get around that is to say, well, the housing structure itself is, what will be the no PvP area. So I do think that actually explains, or gives us an idea a little bit of the proximity of freeholds to each other, or the potential for. So
I wonder if the corruption rules would be different. Like, if you can, on a freehold that you own or have permissions to, fight back against an attacker and still remain green and still count as a non-combatant because you're within a certain sort of sanctioned safe zone, but you are actively defending it in a semi-sanctioned sort of manner.
I don't think they would do that, just because you can't. Some skills are not usable against greens, right? So that kind of would remove. You have some sort of an advantage if you were able to use all of your skills, but the person trying to PK you can't use, half of theirs.
And AoE. Well, if you drop an AoE on someone else's house, I don't know if the things are invulnerable or if you would get corruption for like property damage.
That would be, property damage.
Graffiti.
Charge them money.
No, actually, now I like the idea of putting graffiti on other people's freeholds.
I'm going to see a bunch of penises and balls hanging around.
Well, even if it's just from like a predefined set of like runes and sigils and things that you could put up, or mock-ups of like the paintings that you'll see in a house, like, oh, you want a sunset? Bam, I just put a nice sunset with a boat on the horizon. Eat that. You want to do something? You're going to come to my freehold? I'll take you on.
Well, I just want to say, the idea of writing a book about your travels within a game and then having them show up in other people's housing as sort of copies of your book is really freaking cool. I could see where that could potentially turn into a disaster from what people might write, but that idea is really neat. Would love to see that. So I guess this is sort of related to freeholds just from a number perspective. Another question was, with map size tripling, in size, or nearly tripling. Is there any plan to increase server population caps? I don't. So I went back and looked to make sure, and at least on the wiki, they're estimating 8 to 10,000 per server, with up to concurrent as their goal. With, I guess, starting out only allowing 15,000 accounts per server, and then that would expand up to 50,000. That seems fine to me. I don't think that an increased world necessarily means you need to increase the server size, especially when most of that increased is just water, because then you're just going to make it even more painful on the actual livable areas.
I mean, unless the whole thing is actually supposed to be like EVE Online, and the null sec is essentially the open waters, and that's where the real gameplay happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the point of increasing it in that way was so that you wouldn't have everybody kind of bumping up into each other. So I think they won't increase the server size population-wise significantly, but we'll have to see. It's a good question.
What else? This was an interesting question too, and I think I know my answer. I'm curious of yours. It's will raid bosses scale with the node level? So if the example was, if a Cyclops boss can spawn with a level 3 node and is level 20, if the node goes up to level 4, would that boss then gain 10 levels, and sort of scale with the node?
Yeah, I think so.
My hope would be that it's not a Cyclops anymore, that something else takes its place.
Well, we saw the Cyclops weapons. I wasn't sure if those were for the players or for the Cyclopses, but maybe that's what it is it gains 10 levels and it upgrades from, the golf swinging club to like one of those bows or the magic staff or something, and gain some new abilities.
Still, if it's progressing with the node stage, I'd rather for the node stage to mean something significant happened than other NPCs and bosses have taken over that space so that it's more dynamic than static.
Actually, a thought kind of occurs from that is the idea of bosses that you find being part of an indication of the progress of the node, where at the moment it hits tier 3, the level 20 Cyclops may occur or may exist somewhere, but as the place progresses and gets closer and closer to the next level, the level of the Cyclops gradually increases. So if you're fighting a level 28 one, you're able to recognize from that, okay, so this is a fairly well advanced tier 3 node. It's going to move up to the next level soon, and we know this because the raid boss we're fighting is on the tougher side for this node, not the easier side.
Mm-hmm.
Here was my thought on this. I would not prefer to see the boss change at all in terms of level or difficulty just because the node changed. I would like to see that turn into become a part of the lore. Yes, the node has now changed, so now we have new content. So maybe now instead of a 20 to 30 Cyclops, now we have a 30 grizzly bear that's up in the mountains that's more powerful.
That's my point.
But we still have the Cyclops that's still here because no one's killed it yet. That's still a raid boss, and that at that point does that transition happen? So, there's one last kill of something that was related to the previous, or last few kills or something like that, and then eventually that level 20 Cyclops is no longer present, because that also then gives you layers of content for each level of character. One thing I loved about EverQuest was that I could raid at level 45. I didn't have to get to 60. There were raids starting at 40, 45, 25, all the way through. There was there's content. Each zone had multiple levels of content as well. And so this would allow there to be a variety of things, challenges for different leveled adventurers. So.
Yeah, but that's reminding me too much of 50 Dark Pot. I mean, sure, in some instances it's fine for 50 Dark Pot to gain some levels, so it's not always, eternally level 1. But also at some point we have killed the Cyclops multiple times probably. So
That's what I mean.
we should be able to kill him finally and then something else move in. Yeah.
Level change, node changes, you get one last kill. And maybe it's a special one. Maybe something unique drops. Maybe there's some competitive reason to actually go find down the last the last remaining big bosses of the last era or node, because you get a trophy or something that you can then put into your freehold. Or maybe your name gets put into a book that ends up on a shelf that, the Lord Diggs was the last to kill, One Eye or whatever his name might be. Which I know we're about out of time, but this kind of leads to another question, which I thought was interesting. Again, I know my answer was Ashes is going to be server based, but are there any plans for cross server competition to see how good your server is compared to players from other servers? Any thoughts on that?
I'm not interested in that.
It's kind of an interesting sort of thing, but I wouldn't want there to become an emphasis for all players on all servers to have to help and advance and push things forward, so that way the server can be competitive against other servers. I feel like that would potentially go down a bad sort of road where, in particular, the one that I really worry about is the PvP Gankfest server. They might be more optimized for PvP, and in an open battle, those players are better against people that haven't committed as far in it. But that's also the corrupted, blighted server that's about to fall apart and get merged in with one of the other bad servers because they haven't done anything to maintain it. So instead of the people that are trying to maintain the server and keep it in good shape being able to continue focusing on that, now they have to be like, oh no, we've got to get ready for this competition, everyone get into PvP mode. And then it just becomes a race to the bottom because everyone's trying to get PvP spec'd and they just let the corruption run rampant. So no, I think that would actually be a very bad thing for the game.
I mean, the point of Ashes is supposed to be the focus on developing your world, specifically your nodes, your social organizations, your religions, your castles. It doesn't make sense to be competing against this other world. And if it's some kind of skill prowess that you want, just create a character on some other server and go play against those people. But it doesn't make sense from what the focus is that each world is competing against another.
Yeah. And this is why I said it was kind of tied to the previous. Was my thought on that was also no, because not every server is going to have seen that level 20 Cyclops, right? So we are going to have different experiences. We are going to have different gear. One server is not going to look like the other. So the idea of creating a competition between the two just seems like a flawed idea when they're not on equal ground to start with. So although that could be an interesting thing to see. Maybe one server has much more of the ranged capabilities, another one has developed more of upfront combat. I don't know. It's just interesting to see how things will change.
I mean, I don't know what happens when you're trying to do server merges. Maybe that's the time when you do that kind of competition. I don't know.
That's actually a good point. That would be a good time where what's left of the areas that are not totally devastated is kind of what you're fighting to protect as the servers merge. And if there's, two towns in the same spot, well, one's got to stay and one's got to go. So you place them both basically in an arena opposed to each other. And it's like, all right, whichever side wins this conflict, your town is the one that stays. And the other one, blown away.
Well, we are basically out of time. There are some that I didn't get to that I will mention again. I think just the elephant in the room. Let's see. What is your stance in regards to focusing on delivering a minimum viable product versus continuously upgrading your tools? There was another one that was, is there any updates on spot testing, as it's been 8 months since it was stated it would start in the next several months? And then the last one, which we kind of talked about, is there's been a large change in player sentiment over the last 6 months, and many are wondering if Intrepid should move from a monthly schedule to an every 2 or 3 month schedule, to cut down on filler. I actually, again, would argue yes, that would be a very good idea. It would give us less to talk about, but.
My thing is, if you're doing every 2 to 3 months, what does that say about when Alpha 2 is starting? Because that means you're going to have, what, 2 or 3? You're going to have 2 or 3 live streams before the end of the year? So that means Alpha 2 is not happening until 2024. I mean, if they do that, that's the obvious indication that Alpha 2 is not happening before 2024. So,
Well, we are now past the first quarter of the year, moving into the second quarter. So, I don't know. We've not seen crafting yet. Seen a whole lot of combat. That's what we'll get to see Friday. Neat looking zone. Maybe some lore. Hopefully. We'll see. But not a lot of the other stuff. As you mentioned, nodes. He said when we had Steven on, he said crafting would be in Alpha 2, and we have not seen anything related to it. So
we saw one interface.
Wow, but
that was part of the UI demo. That wasn't actually crafting.
Yeah, I was gonna say we didn't actually see it used. We saw what somebody put a mock-up of. He didn't actually hit craft with items that created a new item. But anyways. Keep heads up. I know it will happen eventually. I still, again, fully believe Ashes will release. I think it's just a question of with what, and obviously when. So, all right. Well, we will be back here next Sunday, hopefully with brand new content to go over. As we mentioned, Friday is the live stream, so make sure to watch. If not, we will recap it on Sunday. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you back here in 7 days.
See you then.